Tackling the task of introducing our featured speaker, I kind of felt like a mosquito in a nudist colony. I didn't quite know where to begin. I can't think of a more appropriate person to be a featured speaker at a Hall of Fame ceremony. His accomplishments as a player are legendary in proportion. NBA MVP, World Champion, All-Star Game MVP, you could go on and on. I can't think of a player who represented our game with more class and dignity throughout his career than Julius Erving. After basketball, he's also been equally successful. His love and genuine concern for his family and for people in general is also of Hall of Fame caliber. Not only has he become a very successful businessman, his list of civic and community service awards is about as endless as his basketball accomplishments. Just to name a couple, he was a National Urban League Whitney Young Award winner in 1984, the National Lupus Foundation National Award winner in 1985, the Walter Kennedy Service or Citizenship Award in 1983, and again, it goes on and on. At this time, it's with a great deal of pride and appreciation that I introduce to you a certain future Hall of Famer himself, Julius Dr. J. Erving.
Everybody like to stand up and stretch your legs. So I'd really like to thank members of the head table, the honored guests tonight, and the citizens of Michigan for welcoming me here to Michigan once again. Thanks. And I'd just like to say that certainly we have a huge number of basketball fans here, and if you guys are like I am, sitting and listening to some of the war stories was a real treat. And once again, to the Hall of Fame inductees, I think we do owe them a round of applause. They was I had a good time during dinner sitting and talking with Tom and Ed over here. And I had a chance to think about a few things, maybe like that mosquito in the nudist colony, trying to decide where to begin, because this is a tantalizing audience. We have basketball coaches, their families. We have basketball coaches and their families. We have basketball coaches and their families. Nobody else is in this room other than basketball people. And in coming to Michigan, I started to think about some of the people who I looked upon as contemporaries, adversaries, or what have you, in the world of basketball. And the list just went on and on, from Cazzie Russell to Rudy Tomjanovich, Trent Tucker, Campy Russell, Magic Johnson, Terry Furlow, Phil Hubbard, Jay and Sam Vincent, George Gervin. These are all basketball players from Michigan, you know. Did you know that? Yeah. Some of you probably coached some of these individuals, or at least coached against teams that they were on. Terry Tyler, Spencer Haywood, Dave DeBuscher. I know somebody coached Dave DeBuscher because I heard that mentioned. But, you know, and the list does go on and on. I'm sure I've left a lot of people off who did make it in the pro game. But that's really not what I came to talk to you about, and I really didn't come to talk to you about basketball stories either. I was given a subject to talk about. I think I was given one, at least that's what I read on my itinerary, something that was entitled Attitude for Winning. And I think I was asked to talk about that because none of the other coaches who participated in the clinics today or yesterday were asked to talk about that. So we needed a little variety in terms of addressing you. And my friends, family from Converse decided to give me the task of talking about attitude. Now, I don't know whether that was because they thought I had a good attitude, or I was just knowledgeable on the subject, or I could be up to the task of talking about something that's not fundamental, not tangible, and very difficult to talk about. I have to talk to Ernie about that one a little later on. But anyway, I did think about it, and I thought that probably the best way to approach it was to maybe make a few analogies. And start out with the first analogy. I'm going to tell you a little story, a little anecdote. And it begins with a burglar who's sitting outside of a house and waits till a little past midnight. And then he breaks into the residence, and upon entering, he hears this voice that says, "Jesus is watching." He gets a little nervous about this, and ducks down behind the sofa, and he peers up, and he hears this voice that says, "Jesus is watching." And he sees that these eyes are glaring at him in the darkness, and he gets a little nervous about that. He sits down behind the couch, and his heart is thumping, and he's a little worried, and then he calms down. He gets a little bit of courage, because after all, he was a burglar, so he wasn't a total chicken. He looks up again, he hears that voice, and it says, "Jesus is watching." And he reaches around, he fumbles, and he finds a light, clicks it on, and he sees that those eyes belong to this big, black, militant-looking German Shepherd. And he sees that above the dog's head, there's this cage, and there's a parrot in the cage. And the parrot says, "Jesus is watching you." So then he really breathes a real sigh of relief. He says, "Oh, you stupid bird. Can't you say anything else besides that?" And the bird says, "Yeah, sure. Sick him, Jesus." So anyway, I think that used to be, in the beginning, my old attitude towards sports, maybe even life, and some of the extracurricular activities that I used to get involved in. Just sick 'em, stick your head in there, be aggressive, and just take up the challenge and be totally physical about it. And then when the smoke clears after a basketball game or a baseball game or what have you, generally the results are, the more aggressive player, the one who decided to sick him, the one who put his head in there and had little regard for the body, was the one who came out on top. And maybe when you're a child, you can take that approach. So I kind of look at that, and I just decided to label that my old attitude. And I think it stems from a couple of things that happened to me during my childhood, and not necessarily that happened to me, but things that were experience of mine that I would relate to my play as a child and my work as a child. And the two things I wanted to talk about, games that I played. One did deal with reckless abandon, total disregard for body, and sticking your head in there, because I used to go to the playground right next to the apartment building that I lived in, and they had the swing set and the merry-go-round and all that kind of stuff in a sandy area. And one of the challenges for me and the other kids there was to get in swings and swing as high as we possibly could go, and then jump out. And you would swing, get the swing going back and forth, and you would on the front swing, you would just jump out, and once you hit the ground, you get up, you draw a line, and then you look at the next guy and say, "All right, beat that," right? And then if he beat it, and you'd have to get back on the swing, and you would try to beat it. So eventually you jump to 10 feet out, then 12, then 20 feet out, maybe even 25 feet. And this was my first real experience with hang time. We had some great jumps. And the most important thing about those jumps was learning how to land. And I think back over the course of my basketball career, many times when I left the ground and I got airborne, I never really had a fear about where I was going to land. There were a couple of knuckleheads that I played against who would run under you, try to take your legs out, and maybe once something like that happened, you'd be a little fearful if that particular person was around. But usually, nobody was around. You know, there was only people standing there saying, "That guy, is it for real?" and you could land safely on your Converse shoes, of course. And make a U-turn and go down and pretend you were playing defense. When I think about that game, and I think about another game, as a child that I used to play, and this didn't involve any of the other kids, and it was just something that when I got sent out of the house to go on an errand, I would always try to do it as quickly as possible. And it was easy. I live on the third floor of this apartment building, projects, whatever it was. It's called Parkside Gardens anyway. I used to go out to the first landing, and there was 7 steps on the landing. So I used to jump down, make the turn, then jump down 7, make the turn, jump down 7, make the turn. So I had to do that 6 different times because it was 2 sets of steps to each story of the building. And then I'd go to the store and I'd get whatever the package was, and I'd come back, and then I said, man, it's so easy jumping down. I hate to run up all these steps because I wasn't really into running up steps, but I wanted to try and jump up the steps since, it was the flip side of jumping down. Right? It's a good reason. Right? So I remember when I began, and I started doing this maybe about 7 or 8, at age 7 or 8, and initially, I used to jump up 3 steps, and then jump up another 3 and walk 1. And then as time went on and I ran more errands, I realized that I could then jump up 4 steps, and then 3, and then I could jump up 5, then 2, then I could jump 6, and then 1, and then I could jump up all 7 steps, and make the turn, and jump up 7 more steps. So then once I got it down pat, I jump down 7 steps, and I go out to the store, come back, and I jump up 7 steps. And I was the only kid in my projects who could do this. And I think it's worth talking about because once again it was just taking this attitude that I think in some way maybe down the road led to winning, but it was an attitude of sicking it. And what was I sicking? Well, I was sicking something that I had planted in my mind as a challenge for me. And I guess like the man who went and climbed the mountain the first time, and people say, well, why'd you do that? And he says, well, because it was there. Well, the steps were there, and nobody was standing behind me, whipping me, making me do it, but it was something I wanted to try and achieve and accomplish, and until I became an adult, I never really told anybody about it. As a matter of fact, I forgot about it once I moved out of the project. So at 13, I moved into a house, and anytime I ran into the house, all I got was, don't you run in the house, wait till you get outside. But, so that was the play area, and I did mention work as a childhood, and I did have a job as a child, which I think was necessary to do well by programming your attitude first and then going out and doing the job. And I used to have an early morning newspaper route. And I grew up in New York, in Long Island, suburbs of New York. And we used to deliver 4 newspapers: the New York Times, the Mirror, the Tribune, and the Daily News. And all those papers aren't around anymore, but I used to be one of the paper boys at age 11 who used to get on a truck in the morning and go through suburban community on the running board of the truck and reach in and take a newspaper out, or take 3 of them out, jump off the running board, and put one at this house, one at the next house, one at the next house, and then jump on the truck, because the truck was going down the middle of the street, what you could do very easily because I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We started delivering the papers at 5, and we finished at 7, and then I got back home time enough to get ready to go to school. Then I have to be at school till about 8:30 or so. But doing this for 2 years between age 11 and 13 probably helped to shape and mold me, if not attitude-wise and mentally, in terms of work ethic, at least physically. It was a great way to stay in shape. And so, as I was saying before, that this was probably these were probably 3 of the things that contributed to the old attitude. But that's not my attitude anymore. I don't just view life, or would I advise you to view your job, or to go back and advise your kids or advise your players, just to take the attitude of saying sick 'em and then, run out on the court and try to do the best that you can from a physical perspective. Otherwise, your team's probably going to resemble the Keystone Cops or something like that, or something silly. But those were part of a real experience, which become one part of developing an attitude towards winning. The other part, or another part, I'll lead into with a little story about a person who was a role model for me ever since a very early age. I happened to be born on February 22nd, 1950, and that was the birthday for George Washington's birthday, or George Washington, the father of our country, right? Although he was born another year. Let's see if y'all are awake, right? But, my favorite president was Abraham Lincoln. And he was born on February 12th, and he happened to be the 12th president of the Union. Well, anyway, to get into the story and to get into the analogy, one of the things I read about him when I was a youngster is that before he got involved in politics, he served for a time in the Illinois militia. And, he wasn't all that quick, and, he was kind of like his picture looked. He was tall and dark and bearded and looked like a guy who would walk slow and talk slow. And as it turned out, from this story, he wasn't the quickest person around. And one day he was out marching his troops in an open field, and although he wasn't that quick, he was pretty resourceful, because it seems in this story that he was marching his troops in this open field, and they were rapidly approaching a fence that only had a small opening in it. And since he was marching the troops and they were four abreast, he was trying to think of the proper command, the command that would properly dictate to them in military fashion, what to do with this situation. And he got a little nervous about it because they were still approaching this fence. And then he thought, he said, okay, halt. Everybody take a break and sit out for 10 minutes and then fall in on the other side of the fence. Very resourceful thing to do. And I think that probably is an adequate analogy for my the next attitude that I had, the next phase of an attitude towards winning, combining what you have physically with what you have upstairs mentally. Just as Coach Pickett was saying, he always had thinking players, always had players who, when timeouts came, it was time for him to talk, tell them what to do. He prepared them for the game before, lectured to them afterwards, but when it was time to play, you had players who could think on the floor, and they could take what they had physically with the gifts that they have mentally and make it happen for them. So at age maybe 9 or 10, that was kind of injected into the formula, combining the physical with the mental. And who knows what the magic combination is? Is it 50% physical, 50% mental, 70% physical, 30% mental, or something other than that? Well, I think that only the experience of time and perseverance itself can tell a player or tell a coach what that magic combination is, what you need to bring to the table in order to be successful, to be a winner. And don't let this point be lost upon you, because I think it's very important, and I think it's very important for your players to have confidence in making decisions for themselves, and knowing that you're going to support them even when the decisions don't turn out right, because as long as you're in the game, you need to try to do different things that are going to make you successful, and you have to have the freedom to fail in order to have your creativity stimulated. And think about other role models, since I mentioned Abraham Lincoln, because there are probably some things that everyone here would want to take back to other people and say that, well, Julius Erving said this or thought this or felt this, And I do have other role models in life, but you might be curious about, and I'm going to volunteer them since we're not going to do a question and answer session. But on that list would be Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, Bill Russell, and Bill Cosby, to go with Abraham Lincoln. And if anybody asks, now you have the answer to that. But I have one more phase to complete the trilogy here relevant to attitude. And the example I'm going to use is a story, or maybe a joke that Flip Wilson, the comedian, used to tell. And Flip used to dress up like a preacher, and used to stand before, pretend he was standing before a congregation, and he would say, I'm new here, but we're going to have a good church, and our church is going to grow, and I got the formula for that. And they would say, make it grow, Rev, make it grow. They said, well, for us to grow, first we have to crawl. The church would shout back to him, make it crawl, Rev, make it crawl. He said, well, after we crawl for a little while, and he started getting the feeling, getting loose, because they were responding to him. After we crawl for a little while, then we're going to walk. We're going to stand up and we're going to walk. And then the congregation would shout back to him, make it walk, Rev, make it walk. Then he said, after we walk, I think we're going to run. And he started feeling real good about it. We're going to run. And they said, make it run, Rev, make it run. He said, and for us to run, we got to have some money. And then they shout back to him, make it crawl, Rev. Now, I'm going to tie this together somehow, right? Now, that's a statement about pace. And the fact that, people like to do things, like to get things done, but they kind of like to get them done at their own pace, in the way that they decide is best for them to do it. I think that's what it says. At least that's what I hope it says. And I have noticed, and I think it's true with me too, even with myself, that you function better if you feel that you're partially in control of the pace at which you have to go out and get something done. Now, how does this tie to attitude for winning? Well, I know that personally, I'm the one who's responsible to organize my thoughts, and I can have some measure of control over how I'm going to disperse my energy. If I'm playing a basketball game, I'm going to play 48 minutes, which is the length of a professional game, and I know I have to play all 48 minutes, then let me say that I'm going to pace myself. I'm just not going to go all out in the first quarter, because I want to have something left, the last 6 minutes of the game. So dispersing one's energy, organizing yourself mentally by doing your homework, doing the preparation that's necessary, so that mentally you're sharp and you have the other team scouted, you know your strengths and weaknesses, and you've implemented the thought process into your effort, and you have control of your physical effort because you know how you're going to go about playing the game, and you have this attitude that you're not going to quit. You might get beaten, but you're not going to quit. You're not going to walk off the court. You're not going to give up on yourself. You're not going to give up on your teammates, and you're going to be in the game right until the very end. I think if those are the things that you think about, then that's a good present attitude to have. It's probably the attitude that I have presently, and the one that I encourage others to think about having. There's no perfect formula for winning. There's nothing that's going to guarantee victory for anyone. With all the energy and effort that's put into playing basketball, selling shoes, what have you, organizing a banquet, there's just no guarantee. You don't know until after the fact how good you've really done. But there are a couple of things that I always have said. One's a borrowed quote, which everybody knows, and that's: a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, which means that if everybody individually programs their attitude and decides what pace they want to move at, what they want their attitude to be, what their desired results are, what they set as their goals, a team is still only as strong as the weakest link, the weakest player. So that has to be done collectively. At some point in time, those thoughts have to be put on the table and agreed upon before somebody can go out and play a good game. be successful, be a winner. And another thing I said, which relates very closely to what Chuck Hollis said a little bit earlier, and I have said, and I've gone on record as saying, you must win without boasting and lose without crying, and adopted that as an attitude towards playing my sport for many years. And there was one instance in which tears came to my eyes after a basketball game, and it wasn't because I was a crybaby. It was just because I was hurt and confused about something. And I only remember it happening on one occasion, but there were a lot of occasions in which success was there and victory was there, but I wouldn't allow myself to boast about it or brag about it, because I had an attitude, and attitude is something that we do have some measure of control over. You might not have control over whether you're going to win or lose, you're going to have a good day, bad day, so on and so forth, this and that, but when you wake up in the morning, you can say, well, I'm going to be an optimist versus a pessimist. I'm going to be a friend rather than a foe. I'm going to be good rather than bad. And it's your attitude that determines these things. And generally, I've found that what you decide you want to be or what you want to do on a given day is how that day turns out. So you do have some control. And winning without boasting and losing without crying is a good philosophy to have, and also for your kids to have. And while we've talked about a lot of things in a short period of time, we have talked about role models, and with society today, I could inundate you with all the things that I think and feel about the society in which we live, and role models in general, and the drug problem, alcohol problem with kids, problem with adults, and apathy towards what nature has given us, the homelessness that exists, and so on and so forth. But I don't want to get into all that. I do want to say one thing, and I hope it sticks with you, and that's something that I feel very strongly about, and that's that the most important role model in a kid's life is the person who sits across from that kid at the dinner table each night. And it might be a mother, it might be a father, it might be a brother, it might be a sister, it might be a coach, it might be a caretaker of some kind, it might, be whoever. But whoever sits across that table from that kid, night in and night out, that's the role model that the kids need to look at, and those are the people who need to accept the responsibility of being role models. And with that, I'm going to close and just say to you that, in conclusion, that outside of God and my family, the person who is the most important person in my life today is the person who is with me in every business endeavor that I get involved in. He manages my office in Philadelphia. And that was my high school basketball coach, a guy named Ray Wilson. So the roles that you have, you guys who are coaches, former coaches, the roles that you have and the impact that you have on young men and women's lives generally reaches a lot farther than your wildest dreams will let you even imagine. And I'm living proof of that. Thank you, and God bless you.